So let's start with the talk, and Savannah, I will pass the mic to you.
Cool. Thank you, Christoph, so much for that introduction. I am going to share my screen and turn off my camera. Okay, can everyone see my screen? If anybody just wants to like say yes in the chat. Yep. Thank you. Cool. Okay, well, welcome. Good morning, good evening, good whatever time it is for you. I'm super delighted for you all to be here and to listen to my short talk on Elixir, resource gems for better comprehension. I want to real quickly thank Curiosum for inviting me here today and giving me a platform to speak on. You guys rock. Also, I just got my wisdom tooth taken out, so some of the words I say are like kind of difficult. So if there's anything that doesn't come out right, just ask me to repeat it. Okay, so a brief overview of what we'll discuss in the next 30 minutes. This is a high-level talk on the Elixir programming language. We'll cover a few heavily utilized key elements that make up Elixir, but we won't go into too much depth. So this is a really good talk for someone with previous programming experience, but interested in adopting Elixir as their next language. If you don't have any previous programming experience, the examples are simple enough to follow along with, but some syntax and terminology might be a little confusing. Okay, so I really have two goals for this talk. My first one is kind of an echo of what Curiosum is about. I really want to make everyone realize how awesome Elixir is. So my hope is that you take away from this, you want to continue on your Elixir learning journey. The second goal is to give you some tips and a starting point to teach yourself. There's a lot of resources out there for larger programming languages, less so for Elixir, but there are a few that really stand above the rest and make the learning process a whole lot easier. So the bulk of this talk is going to be some key elements that make Elixir awesome. Mostly this is going to be about pattern matching. So we'll do some brief examples that kind of build on each other, and pattern matching will kind of be at the center of this, and we'll build on it as we go. At the end, I'll provide some learning resources for you to utilize after the talk. Really quickly, on the left, that is me. I was previously a JavaScript developer, and then I got a job at Iconic Moments, and they use predominantly Elixir on the front and the back end. Outside of coding, I am a rock climber. On the right is my dog. She is super cute and adorable. Her name is Pseudo, and if you're in this talk and think this is a little too high level for me, then at least you got to see a puppy. Also, Pseudo's going to be following us through some of these examples, so you'll see her name quite often. So why is Elixir awesome? Well, I'll give you a few examples. Bleacher Report went from needing 150 servers to just 5 thanks to its decision to move from Ruby on Rails to Elixir. Pinterest sped up their notification system by cutting their servers from 30 to 15 when switching from Java to Elixir. Discord successfully handles 5 million concurrent users and millions of events per second. And yes, they use Elixir. So there's a trend here. It's speed and scalability. These are definitely two of the biggest things that make Elixir really rad for what it is. You're probably not convinced after I just gave you a couple of examples. So let's dive in and code it out. Okay, first things first. So we kind of need a foundation to test our code. And to do that, we're going to be using IEX. IEX stands for Interactive Elixir, and it is a REPL. REPL means read, eval, print loop. It has a ton of benefits. It provides an interactive environment for executing Elixir code. It allows you to explore data structures, test code snippets, enables experimentation of code, and really it's just a wonderful and essential tool built into the Elixir environment. I'm going to give a quick example of how this works. So you have to be in an Elixir project to use IEX, and I am currently. It's called Pseudo. Type in IEX. You can do basic arithmetic. you can assign variables. You can call upon built-in modules. And really the possibilities are endless. So you'll see, I'm not going to do too much live coding. Actually, that's all the live coding I'm going to do. But you will see examples of IEX popping out throughout this code. Okay, pattern matching. So I chose to focus on pattern matching because I think it's one of the strong points of Elixir, and I found it to be particularly challenging coming from an OOP background. And we'll kind of get into that a little bit. Pattern matching, if you don't know what that is at all, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's used to match values against patterns and destructure data structures. On the right, you can see that I have a variable named pup, and I bind it to the string literal pseudo. In Elixir, the equal sign operator is actually called the match operator. So what's different here between other programming languages is that in this situation, Elixir is binding the left side to the right side and creating a match. So whenever we flip it around and put pseudo on the left side, it's going to evaluate to true for pup. Pretty cool. All right, so we're just going to dive right in. We're going to go with a destructuring pattern match example. So in IEX, if we assign pups to a list of strings, pseudo, iro, and chuki. I know it looks like Chucky, but there's supposed to be an umlaut over the U. I just got too lazy to add it. So chuki. And we press enter, then it spits out that list in strings. A quick side note, I just said list, I didn't say array. So a list in Elixir is a collection of values and can store multiple types. Kind of sounds like an array, but it's not an array. It's actually a linked list. You can't access an item via index, so if you try to do pups at 1, you're going to get an error. And there's some under the hood stuff here that's going on that has to do with pointers, which is why it's not an array, but this is outside the scope of the talk. Just know that this is the list. So in IEX, if we try to destructure this value, we can. By taking a list and adding in the variables A, B, C, we can pattern match on the right side of those strings. So if we were to now type in A, we would get pseudo, B, iro, and C, chuki. What happens if we try to pattern match on a list that's longer than our assigned list? We get a match error. Elixir is really good about raising errors and generally give you a pretty good idea of what you need to do to fix it. Another quick aside, immutability. So at first I was kind of dumbfounded by immutability, but I've really grown to love it and make sure data flow more consistent. Data in Elixir is constant and it cannot be modified once it is defined. This isn't the best example, but I kind of had a hard time showing like an example without going too in depth, but simply think of it like this. Whenever we take pups and we assign it a list of strings and we try to reassign pups, and I say that with air quotes, it will rebind it to a new value, but it does not mutate the previous result. So the previous pups is just floating in memory. State in Elixir is rebound and not mutated, meaning a whole new copy gets created every single time. Can you use that in a sentence? So let's build up our syntax a little bit. Starting with modules. Modules are used to group related functions and data together, similar to classes in object-oriented programming. Modules are really cool because they start with a def module, keyword, and then a module name, and this usually follows naming conventions like a folder and a file. So in this example, I had the folder's name was pseudo and the file was called greetings. Within this, you can add in functions freely. So here I've defined a function named hello, and it takes in one parameter, and it outputs hello and then whatever the string that you pass in is. We can call that by writing pseudo.greetings.hello and passing in the string pseudo. io.puts is, it'll print out to the console. Oh, and string interpolation. So if you look at the end of io.puts, the hashtag and the curly brackets are how you do string interpolation in Elixir. So if we run this in IEX, we get hello pseudo. All right, so now we're really jumping headfirst. This is kind of a more advanced concept, but I feel like this is one of the better ways to show you how awesome pattern matching is, and that's pattern matching on functions. So let's define a function. We're going to call this function bark, and it's going to take in a list. We take the list and we divide it into a head and a tail. If you remember, a list is a linked list, so you can split the two. We're going to print out the result of the head so we can see how that changes as we go along. And then we're going to do a recursive call to tail. So I mentioned this is good if you already have some programming experience, but if not, just a quick note on what recursion is. Recursion is when a function can call itself, making it possible to use recursion to solve problems. So at the very end where bark is called again, it's calling itself with a new list, and that list will be tail. So if we were to call this an IEX, we're going to get a match error. We call sudo.greetings.bark with a list of 3 strings, and you can see it prints out those 3 strings, and then it says no match of right-hand side value on an empty list. That's because it continues to evaluate till the entire list is empty, and then whenever we pass in the empty list, it can't find a function that matches this argument. So what do we have to do? Create another function so we can have a function that will match. We're going to create another function called bark and pass it an empty list. We're just going to put out, okay, I'm done barking at the thing now. This is called our base case. So our base case is what's going to stop the program from running. The other one is our recursive call. We're going to add an inspect in to see the list shrink. So let's run it in IEX. When we run this in IEX, we can see the output of the list, and we can see the actual called result. So woof, woof, woof. Okay, I'm done barking at the thing now. And we can see that the list grows shorter and shorter until it hits the other function with the empty list and prints out our final result. So to reiterate, 2 functions to match on, bark with a list and bark with an empty list. And then Elixir looks for these functions that matches the values. I think this is pretty cool in pattern matching, and I use it quite frequently. Okay, so this wouldn't be an Elixir talk if I didn't talk about the pipe operator. We're going to do some refactoring, but before that, we're going to write it without the pipe operator. So we'll define a function called transform, and we'll pass it in a parameter called name, and we'll do some passing variables around. So upname, splitted, joined, and we'll kind of just ignore the modules for now and what they're doing. But you can see that we're taking these variables and we pass them down until we finally get to our result and call our previous function hello. This is super common in other programming languages and probably doesn't look too painful to the eyes right now, but trust me, whenever your functions get bigger, it just gets more annoying. The pipe operator. This just makes everything aesthetically pleasing. It's syntactical sugar, but it really makes data flow more obvious, in my opinion, when it comes to parsing through data in Elixir. So in this example, we take transform again, and we take the parameter name, and we pass it to the string.upcase method, and we're going to inspect it. So when we call this an IEX, we have the name pass through sudo, and sudo goes through string.upcase, and we can see it prints out sudo uppercased. If we add in another function call, then we can see that the previous evaluated result gets passed into the next function call. So there's actually 3 arguments on string.split. You just can't see it because it gets passed in through the pipe operator. So now we have a list with PSEUDO. Now we're going to join those together on a dash. And finally, we're going to print out the result. So we get hello PSEUDO. Yeah, it's pretty nice looking, huh? What about built-in libraries? So we should probably talk a little bit about iteration. The enum module is one of my favorites. Hexdocs says this about it: provides a set of algorithms to work with numerables. There are tons of them. So if you go to Hexdocs and look up the enum module, you'll see lots to choose from. It gives pretty good definitions and examples. We're going to look at enum.map, and a quick aside. So it's enum.map/2. This is called the arity. The arity is just the number of parameters a function takes. So you can define the same name function, but you can define it with different parameters. So it has a different arity and thus makes it a different function. So map takes an enumerable first and then a function. The enumerable is going to be a data set that holds a collection of values, and the function is going to be an anonymous function to implement on each enumerable. Another quick aside, anonymous functions, a lot of you probably already know what those are and utilize them frequently, but if not, just a real quick conversation on that. Functions can be defined without names, often referred to as anonymous functions or lambda expressions. And I'll show you the syntax really quick. So the syntax for anonymous functions in Elixir, they begin with an fn and then the parameters and then a skinny arrow, then the execution, and finally they end with an end. enum in action. So let's see enum.map and how it works. So if we run this in IEX, we pass in a list of integer literals and we call a callback on it and multiply x by 2. So we get 2, 4, 6. Let's do a more verbose example. Let's create a function to see how old our pups are in human years. So we define a function called howOld. It takes in two lists, a list of integers and a list of strings. And for our first line, we're assigning a variable called puppy stats, and we're using a few functions from the enum module. The first one we're using is called enum.zip, and what this does is it zips corresponding elements from two enumerables into a list of tuples. So enum.zip takes two lists, and it will spit out another list with tuples inside that list. Tuples. Most of you also probably know what tuples are, but in Elixir, we often use tuples. They are shown as curly brackets, and like lists, tuples can hold any value. For example, the string pseudo and the number 24. Our enum.map call, this evaluates to a list. So when we pass our numbers list in and we multiply it by 7, then we get a new list with those new numbers. Let's inspect the results of enum.zip. So the result is a list of tuples, like I said, and now we can do stuff with this list. Here we're going to call enum.each. Enum.each invokes the given function for each element in the enumerable. So for this example, all we want to do is print stuff to the console. So we're taking our first argument as puppy stats, and we're calling an anonymous function, and we're pattern matching on each of the values inside the list. So we're pulling out name and age, and by doing that, we're able to print the string name is age in puppy years. If we run this in IEX, then we get pseudo is 7 in puppy years, Iro is 14 in puppy years, and Chuki is 21 in puppy years. And that's about it. Those are some of the things that I think make Elixir really awesome. Overall, this was a pretty short talk when it comes to the examples of kind of like what we defined and what we covered, but some of the concepts that we went over, I feel like, are some of the more exciting bits of Elixir, and hopefully they gave you some like insight onto what's going on under the hood. If this was too long and you didn't watch and skip to the end just because you want the learning resources, then just a quick reiteration is that we went over pattern matching, the pipe operator, and immutability throughout the talk. And as promised, some of those learning resources. Joy of Elixir is a general introduction to programming for beginners. It's really great if you don't know a lot of the syntax. It's a pretty short read, and I found it to be really fun to go through. Elixir Programming is a much larger book, and it goes more in depth on Elixir concepts. It even goes into OTP and processes. But I really like the way he teaches and think it's an excellent book to start with second. Pragmatic Studio is more of an applied approach. So this is a video course, and it's definitely more advanced, and they move very quickly. But if you already have the syntax down and generally get a lot of the concepts, then you end up building a Phoenix-like web framework from scratch, which is really cool. Even more resources, some honorable mentions in here. Programming Phoenix is a great book, so if you're interested in the Phoenix web framework, then highly recommend reading that. Testing Elixir, if you're interested in text testing Elixir, which I highly recommend you being interested in. This is a great book to do that. And some online resources that I utilize on a daily basis, Elixirlang, Hexdocs, Elixir School, Elixir Forum. And that is it. Thank you so much for listening to my chat.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Savannah, for this talk. So I think now we can go to a Q&A. So if you have any questions, just write down on chat and we will try to answer it. Okay, so for now we don't have any questions. Yeah. So waiting for questions, I have a fun fact about the pipe operator, because one of my colleagues told me that in the last JavaScript, this feature request or something like that for the new ES standard, there is a pipe operator for the JavaScript. So,
yeah, I saw that.
some creators of the JavaScript are learning from Elixir.
They realized how wonderful it is.
That's a good way to go, guys.
Yeah. Yeah, the pipe operator was definitely like an aha moment for me. I was like, this just makes so much sense and should be in more languages.
Yeah, I think some language already has that. I don't remember which ones, but some are functional. Okay, I see we have a question from Harris, I think. Yes, about the open positions, I think you can check the opportunities on our website on the careers, and also we have Carolina here on chat, and she can talk more about that. Yeah, about the talk, we have a question. What made you decide to go from JS to Elixir?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I wanted to learn a different language outside of JavaScript, and I wanted that to be a functional programming language. And on top of that, I was really excited about learning a niche programming language. So when I interviewed for my current job, it was kind of just like a perfect situation. My brain just works better with the functional approach. Functional programming is easy to test and easy to reason about, and I was really excited about the concurrency like prospects in Elixir. So those were probably my biggest reasons, and maybe my number one reason was the job outlook. Elixir devs get paid pretty well, and it's also just a really delightful language to work with. I get way less headaches with Elixir than I did JavaScript.
Also have a
Exorcism.org. Cool.
Yes.
I've never heard of that.
Yeah, I was using Exorcism too for not only Elixir, and now they have a really fun challenge for this year called 12 in 23 or something like that to learn 12 new languages in the 2023. So I also like that idea. And it also have a functional February now, so maybe it's a good time to learn Elixir with them.
That's a good question. I definitely prefer React still. I work mostly on the back end. I've used LiveView a little bit. It's definitely been a more tedious process in learning than React was, but I think I haven't used LiveView enough to really have a solid opinion on this. I'm definitely like more of a React person on the front end.
Okay, so do we have more questions or?
I did a lot of React Native before this, so for a while I thought I wanted to do mobile development, but Elixir's definitely made me kind of change that approach.
Also, React and React Native are the most major front-end technologies right now, and the Live is still a very young tech. So
yeah, I think Phoenix really shines. Live View is still like quite a bit buggy and clunky. Ash Phoenix. I don't think I know what Ash Phoenix, like the Phoenix, like just Phoenix as a whole.
yeah, I think I also don't know what is Ash, maybe some library or something like that. Let me Google. Yeah.
Okay. I haven't used it, so I don't have any opinions on it. I love working with Phoenix. Phoenix is like super chill. Are people able to talk on here, or is it just the chat?
Just the chat. Okay, so it's a framework over a framework. That's interesting. So I think we have a topic for a new talk.
Yeah, Harris, sounds like you should give a talk on that.
So Harris, we have your info, contact info. So yeah, it looks like the Ash gathers a couple of libraries about JSON API specification and the tools which can help with the API buildings, authentication, etc. So yeah, it's basically a framework over a framework. But yeah, we didn't use that, so we can't talk much about that. But you can, so. Okay, we have another question.
The pin operator. Yeah, so the pin operator will keep your previous value, so it doesn't allow you to rebind mainly any patterns about when it's needed, any gotchas. I mean, you'll kind of just see this in practice. So my recommendation is like just to play around with pattern matching, and you can use the pin operator in like testing and stuff to kind of see how that changes your results. But yeah, it just keeps your previous value from the previous what it was previously set to. Good question. And I think that they recorded this, so you'll be able to watch the video again.
Yeah, exactly. It will be on the YouTube soon.
Yeah.
Okay, so it looks like we don't have any questions for now. So yeah, I think we can finish. So thanks a lot, Savannah, once again for this talk, and
Yeah.
I hope we hear you soon with another talk on the meetup. And
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me here. The talk was short and sweet, and hopefully it just kind of made you all realize how awesome pattern matching is and makes you want to continue being an Elixir dev. And the resources at the end, hopefully you took a screenshot of those, and if not, like I'm pretty sure they'll post the video. But those resources really helped me level up my Elixir learnings like quite quickly. So good luck to all of you. And if any of you are at the Elixir Conf in Europe, I'll be giving another talk there. So come say hi.